Nobody were here, so I don't get what you said. This is called social distancing.
Well, no, I feel like I should feel perfectly fine today. This is just the after effects of several days of coffee. All right, I don't know how to be loud enough to get everyone's attention. Oh. I couldn't think of anything loud enough to get your attention. It's not my voice, that's for sure. I will try to, if you don't mind, I'm going to be a little more subdued. I think my voice will be fine if I can talk a little lower and quieter. This was projecting while preaching was really straining it. But I was hitting a low D while we were singing this. That was something else. But I was vibrating the whole pew. Okay. There was a couple things I wanted to get from our last lesson. So go to page 26. Just talk about a couple loose ends from our last lesson, and then I want to go on to the next lesson, page 27. Let's go ahead and start with a quick word of prayer. Philip, would you mind leading us in prayer? Thanks.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this pretty fall day. We're thankful that we're able to get up, be able to be here and see your creation, see the changing of the seasons. We're thankful to get to be here with Christians of like faith, and that we have your Bible, and that we have such good teachers who studied your word and they're able to explain it and give us new meanings and applications to it. Help us as we listen, that we will be eager to participate, willing to hear, willing to learn and make changes in our life, and help us always have an open heart to your word and to learning more. And help us as we learn to try to teach others and look for ways to be an influence and open doors. And most of that's done not through postcards or through big events, but by us talking to people that we know and have relationships with. We pray that you'll help us to look for these opportunities. Be with all our children in our classes today and all the teachers, and be with us through the rest of this service as we continue to worship you. We're thankful for your Son, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So, from our last lesson that Chris taught this last week, we were talking about how to confront people who are critics of the Bible, and there were a couple of things that I wanted to point out and maybe offer some suggestions, some resources that you could look at. We looked a lot last week around the idea of people who have like specific criticisms about the Bible, like alleged discrepancies or errors in genealogies, or like, well, this verse says this, but this verse contradicts it over here. And so how do we really answer those? Maybe before I offer my suggestions, do you have, when you're looking at things like apologetics, and what does the word apologetics mean? When you talk about apologetics, what is that? Make a defense of something. Yeah, exactly. That's one of those words that over the centuries has actually flipped its meaning. We used to use, hundreds of years ago, used the word apology as defending something. When you would make an apology about something, you would defend something. And then it got flipped around, and now apology means like, giving in and saying, oh, I'm sorry. So it's just one of those weird words. But the word apologetics means to defend something. So what are some resources that you've used over the years when you are making an apology or making a 1 Peter 3 defense of the things that you believe? Maybe online resources, a favorite book. What are some places you've gone over the years?
Right now, I'm reading an apologetics book at the moment called Stealing from God.
Okay.
It's the concept that atheists and people who use nihilism and naturalism, they have no right to use any of those arguments that they're using philosophically because they don't exist under naturalism. And so the very arguments that atheists use to make their point, they're having to steal that from a world which God created.
Yeah, and that's a good point. What's the book called? Stealing from God. Stealing from God. And philosophy is not for everybody. Some people just we all have different strengths and we all have different, psychologically, intellectually, things that make sense to us. Some people are very mechanical. Some people are engineers. Some people are wordsmiths. Some people are philosophers. get it that philosophy isn't for everybody, but I really like the philosophical defense for God. I think there's a very long road of defense that you can make. Like, you can go really far in philosophy in defending who God is and his character, morality, the origin of things. I think just philosophy is very powerful. So that goes along with one of my first suggestions. Is one of my favorite resources for defending the Bible and God on a philosophical level is Dr. William Lane Craig. And he has a website. He does a lot of debates. He's debated Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens. So he's done a lot of really big debates. If you go on YouTube and search for William Lane Craig, C-R-A-I-G, William Lane Craig, and just search for William Lane Craig debates. There's a lot of debates out there that he's had with other philosophers and atheists and biologists like Richard Dawkins.
Ryan, I think the best work that Craig has done is on proving the resurrection through historical evidence.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, extremely faith-building.
Yeah.
Because we can use the same arguments for theism, just why is there a God in general, by going to other sources. But then once you recognize that there is a God, why is it the God of the Bible? Well, that's proving the resurrection. And once you've done that, you prove why we believe the God of the Bible. He does a really fantastic job of providing historical evidence for the resurrection.
Yeah, and what he does with his argument for the resurrection is he's got a multi-pronged defense on it. There's historical reasoning that he offers as far as firsthand accounts, historical firsthand accounts. There's also kind of just a reasoning type of explanation, like, well, this is why the resurrection makes sense. It makes sense given what we know. And then there's also a philosophical argument that he can make about the resurrection. And so his approach to the resurrection is very comprehensive. His approach to the existence of God is also very comprehensive. He has 5 proofs of God's existence. Proofs. Make sure I say that. He has 5 proofs of God's existence that are each one are really, really well developed, well thought out, both philosophical and theological, like explanations for God's existence. And if you want any of his resources, go to reasonablefaith.org. Reasonablefaith.org. There's a ton of stuff. I mean, articles, blog posts, podcasts, videos, charts, like all kinds of stuff on apologetics, especially, again, philosophy. He considers himself a Christian philosopher. So he's not a biologist. He's a Christian philosopher. So if you want philosophy, that's a great resource. Reasonablefaith.org. What other resources are out there? Apologetics Press. Like, I have found that when I want to answer an alleged Bible discrepancy, like, well, this verse says this, but this verse says this, how come those 2 verses say 2 different things? Apologetics Press does a really good job of giving like really reasonable step-by-step explanations. I'm going to be clear, I don't like everything that Apologetics Press does. I've got some opinions on them. I think what they do is Apologetics Press almost takes it so far that they bend over so far backwards to like offer an explanation for some things that it almost ends up becoming just as unreasonable to take their explanation as it would be to not. But what I give them credit for is that they put massive effort into reasonable step-by-step explanations for things. And again, I'll say I don't agree always with the conclusions they come to. I think they strain a little bit hard at some things to come up with solutions, but I give them credit. So I will use like Apologetics Press as like a starting point. That if there's a verse that's like really like I don't know how to answer that, I will go to Apologetics Press and I will open that up and go, okay, what's your explanation? And I'll kind of use that as a starting point for trying to think through critically about an alleged discrepancy to the Bible. So there's a couple of resources. There's a lot more out there that you could look up, but anything else, anything real quick that you want to share before we move on? Any other really great resources that you want to throw out for the class?
There's one called, the book I was referring to earlier is by Dr. Frank Turek.
Turek, Frank Turek, Turek. Yeah, and he's also done a lot of debates as well. He's a very, very good debater, very, very capable. He stays calm, answers things really clearly. He's a very, very good apologist.
He has another book, whenever he debates atheists, he basically uses the outline of his first book, which is I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
Yeah.
That's an awesome one because it points out just how we just think, oh, the scientists, they have all the answers. But he points out how unreasonable Darwinian evolution is.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
And that's what he talks about in his book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and along with that, Answers in Genesis. Again, with Answers in Genesis, I feel like they strain so hard to find a solution to everything that some of the answers they give end up being like, okay, well that's actually more weird and convoluted than just the other side. Like, so I suggest Answers in Genesis with some hesitation, only because I don't agree with a lot of the. Not a lot, but I don't agree with all the conclusions they come to. But as a starting point, okay, if you're trying to go like, okay, this is confusing, I want to know, what do people say? What are some possible? Go to Answers in Genesis and say, okay, well, here's one possible explanation. Maybe I can start there and go like, okay, let me think critically about that, and how does that kind of line up as far as apologetics go? But again, I say that with hesitation because that not everything, I think, is just because you find a solution doesn't mean it's a good solution or a correct solution, right? Because somebody could very easily take a Rubik's Cube and just take all the stickers off and put them in the right order. Well, you found a solution, but that doesn't mean it was the correct solution. You just found a workaround. And I think Answers in Genesis does that sometimes, where they kind of, dishonest is not the right word. I don't want to impute that to anybody, but I think that some of their answers are, they've kind of just peeled the stickers off the Rubik's Cube. But as a starting point of like, okay, well, here's one way, here's maybe a path I could go down for trying to understand this thing from the Bible, to try to understand this. I think it's a good resource. Megan?
This deals more with the how than the what, but nonviolent communication in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's by Dr. Rosengarten.
Okay.
He specifically addresses how to have confrontational or potentially contentious conversations in a way that is nonviolent.
Yeah.
So how to address people, how to get people's guards to lower,
yeah.
so specifically empathizing with them before you start getting into the meatier part of the topic, saying things like, that is such a good question. This is something that I've struggled with personally. Really emphasizing that their concerns are legitimate, instead of just being like, oh, well, you're probably just, I don't know, traumatized by some father figure in your past. It's no big deal. Like, this is just something we're going to brush under the rug and kind of ignore.
Yeah.
Maybe you just have an attitude problem, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Just really being honest and open with, the Bible is a tricky subject, and faith is a really tricky subject, and we as humans struggle with it as well. And so we're going into this together as a team. We're working together to find something that is reasonable instead of you versus me.
Yeah, yeah. And what was the name of that book?
Nonviolent Communication.
Nonviolent Communication by Rosengarten. Rosengarten with a T, Garten, or with a T?
So.
Okay.
I think it's,
Nonviolent Communication. Okay. I like, that's a good suggestion. I've never read that book before. That's really good.
It's very excellent.
And it's active listening. It's exchange, communication. A lot of times, I'm trying to remember, there was one writer, and I cannot remember who it was off the top of my head, but one writer made a really good quote from a book.
Oh, Rosenberg.
Rosenberg. Okay, Rosenberg. And one writer said, we're often so quick to get to defending ourselves while someone else is talking that we don't even listen to what they're saying. Like, while Megan is talking, all I'm doing is planning my next comment before she's even done saying something. And that's not good communication, right? That's not good communication. That's not good listening. And so it is important, if we want to teach people truth and maybe learn some truth ourselves, we've got to be humble enough and disarming enough through our behavior that maybe truth is the thing that gets elevated, not I want to win. Because you can win conversations, you can win debates. And there's plenty of people who win debates without believing what they're saying. I mean, that's what debating class is being given a prompt and saying, now go defend this. Now, you might not believe it. Pie is, cake is better than pie, which is a total lie, and it's an absolute sham. But if you have to defend it, can you win that debate by being a good debater? Sure. That's not communication, though. That's debating, and that's confrontational. So I appreciate that. That's a good suggestion, good resource. Okay, let's go to page 27 now. Let's go to this lesson on page 27, reaching out to the unchurched. And that term actually comes from a book called Reaching Out to the Unchurched from a few years ago, where they, and I should, if I remember it on Wednesday, I'll bring you the information about that book, because there's some really interesting statistics that were taken. I believe it was Pew Research did some research on those who are unchurched, a term being people who just have never gone to church and don't go to church anywhere. These are not people who've left the church or left religion. These are just people who are unaffiliated, uninterested. I don't go anywhere. I don't really know what I believe, whatever. And a lot of research has been done on how do you actually reach those people? And there's some interesting statistics about the things that they actually care about. In the end, what people care about more than anything else is not, facilities or bells and whistles or a coffee shop or whatever. What people care about is content. The number one thing statistically that people care about if they're going to go look for a church is they want to know, what are you going to preach? How good is the preacher in handling the Bible? Do you guys handle questions in a really comprehensive way? Is there robust Bible study programs? I want to learn. If I'm going to go to a church, I want to know, what do you teach, and how am I going to learn that? And that's actually what people care about. But I'll get you, if I remember, I'll get the information about that book on Wednesday and talk a little bit more about that at that time. For now, go to Mark chapter 9. And I'd like a volunteer to read a little bit here to give my voice a break. Mark chapter 9, can I get a volunteer to read verses 14 through 24? Okay? Just read the whole thing, 14 through 24. Mark 9, 14 through 24. Joe, got it. Thank you.
Through 24.
Yeah, 14 through 24.
And when they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them and scribes arguing with them. And immediately all the crowd, when they saw him, were greatly amazed and ran up to him and greeted him. And he asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" And someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." And he answered them, "O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. And it has often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you can, all things are possible for one who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, "I believe, help my unbelief."
That is just such a powerful moment there, isn't it? The desperation of this father crying out. Verse 24, it just gets me. This, "I do believe, help my unbelief." Now, is he contradicting himself there? What does he mean when he says, "I do believe, help my unbelief"? What does that statement mean?
Something's lacking.
Yeah, something's lacking. Yeah, there's a desperation there. I do believe. I think that I believe. I believe something, but clearly there's something missing still. He's deprived somehow. It's almost like, when you have a toddler, and a toddler can communicate to you that she is hurting somehow, but she doesn't have the verbal capacity yet to explain what is hurting why it's hurting. And all you know is that your poor toddler is sitting there on your lap crying about something, saying it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. But they don't know how to explain to you. You're going, well, what hurts, honey? Are you hungry? Is it your stomach? Do you have a headache? And they can't explain it. Like, that to me is what this father's going through. He's like, but I do believe. But help my unbelief. Like, he knows that there is something missing. There's something dysfunctional about his faith, but he can't quite put his finger on what's going on there. How does this story make you feel when you read this story? What's like your takeaway from it? Yeah, Jim?
We also says this has been since birth.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is not just a fleeting thing that he's dealing with. He's had a daily hard experience with something.
Yeah.
So, I know there's times when I think, I believe that God can do it. I don't know if it's God's will to take this.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it too,
I believe that God can do this, so how come I've been hurting for 18 years now? Yeah, and it's maybe there's a little lesson, it's side lesson, this is totally a side lesson, but maybe there's a little side lesson here about those of us who are trying to sympathize with and comfort people who have long-term medical issues, long-term relationship issues, long-term psychological issues. When someone's been sick for 20 years, they've had chronic pain or something like that, and we're just like, hey, listen, you just gotta believe harder, man. We'll pray about it, and you just gotta believe harder. Like, really? You're right in pointing out this has been for the boy's whole life. Essentially his whole life. And this father I don't know how old the boy was. I don't think it was ever mentioned how old the boy is. I imagine probably, fairly young. But let's just, for our imagination's sake, let's say 10 years old, okay? Let's just say 10 years old, just as a nice round number. But can you imagine your kid being sick for 10 years? And not just sick, but like convulsing on the ground, foaming at the mouth, harming himself, sick for 10 years, nothing works. You've prayed about it. I do believe. Hey, I do believe. I prayed about it. I prayed about it 1,000 times. I pray about it every single day. I do believe. So how come it's not working? Yeah, Tom.
To add to that, it's like I do believe, but I even had your disciples try to do this and they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Where am I lacking? I've done everything I can.
Yeah. What else do I need to be doing?
Yeah.
I've done everything. And so I think there's an important lesson there, which again is a side lesson, but just something about when we're talking to our brothers and sisters who have chronic illness and chronic conditions that they're facing, it's don't be fake, be with them, sit with them, weep with them, cry with them, just endure it with them, because sometimes the solution is not like, I think if you just had a little bit more faith, you may be able to lick this thing. Like, well, no, maybe, and maybe not. That's just kind of an unsympathetic way to approach it. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, we, and at least me, also, I won't say we, I'll say me, but sometimes in my short-minded thinking, I think the answer is either yes or no.
Yeah.
Well, there's a third answer that says wait.
Yeah.
And we interpret that, or I interpret that as a no. Well, it must be no because it hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Again, all miracles we know were to profess the gospel and profess Christ. So, it happened for 10 years, but it wasn't the right time yet for that to happen.
Yeah. Well, it's like John 9, right? There was a man who was born blind in John chapter 9. The guy's an adult. He's such an adult that his parents, when confronted by his parents, he's of age, he can answer for himself. This guy's an adult. How old was he? I'm not sure. It was mentioned how old he was in John 9.
Did the parents sin or did the boy sin?
Yeah, that story, yeah. But he's an adult. He's been blind his whole life. And his disciples ask him, well, why is he blind? Is it because of his sin or his parents' sin? And Jesus said, no, third option. Option 3 is he was born blind so that today God could be glorified in him. Now, that's a 30-year process. That's 30 years, whatever, how many years it was, 30, 40 years. Why? So that today God could be glorified in him. Yeah. Yesterday wasn't The solution wasn't yesterday. The solution wasn't 10 years ago. The solution is today, something amazing is going to happen. Rebecca.
So the verse strikes a very deep chord with me. And here is why I'll get a little personal. I am a super duper analytical person. Like, I want the facts, I need the answers, or I will not sleep at night. I want everything laid out so that I have the truth. And part of what comes with that sort of mind is that I'm highly skeptical of everything until it can be proven without a doubt to me. And what I see in this is I want to be able to let go and believe.
Yeah.
But like allowing myself to let go and believe, like he wants to believe that Jesus is going to fix this problem.
Yeah.
But he recognizes that maybe there's something in him that is holding back. And there's that deep-seated doubt that is really hard to overcome.
Yeah.
Just because some brains are wired that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And that also kind of leads to verse 23, which is, there are several ways to interpret verse 23, and I'm not dogmatic. I have where I land on it, but I'm not super dogmatic. You know, you can look at verse 23, and he throws it back at him. Like, if you can, all things are possible to him who believes. Now, one interpretation is he's throwing it back at the man saying, no, the issue is if you can. So, you know, the man comes up and says, excuse me, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us, in verse 22. So, Jesus, if you can do anything, then take pity on us. One interpretation is that Jesus takes it, throws it back at him and says, no, if you can, because all things are possible to him who has faith or believes. I don't like that interpretation, because I feel like essentially that's Jesus saying, like, nah, bootstraps, man, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. If you, listen, you got to change your attitude first. And when you start changing your attitude about me, well, then I'll change my attitude about you. It just kind of smacks of self-reliance and pick yourself up by your bootstraps. So the other interpretation is that Jesus takes that statement, Jesus, if you can do anything, and he says, if you can, if you can, all things are possible. It's not a matter of if I can. Now, New American Standard actually capitalizes the you, the Y, and if you can. So the editors of New American Standard take it to mean Jesus talking about himself. Okay, that's why the Y is capitalized. New American Standard capitalizes all personal pronouns referring to deity. So that's their opinion.
So we put the exclamation point in there. And how do we know it's an exclamation point?
Yeah, exactly.
And not a question mark.
Yeah, there's no punctuation at Greek at this point in the Greek language. There's no punctuation marks in first century Greek. So is it an exclamation point or is it a question? If you can, it's almost like I take it that Jesus is questioning him back, saying, if you can, you're questioning if I can. Oh, I can. And so much more. What's your faith like? Faith? You talk about faith? Help my unbelief. My faith is in tatters right now. My faith is threadbare. My faith has been going through this for 10 years now. My faith is so thin right now. I can't do any more. I just need your help. And so I interpret the story not as Jesus pushing self-reliance on the man, but as Jesus saying, you need to rely on me. And the more you rely on me, the closer you get to an answer. So that's how I take the story. I prefer that. I think it's a better interpretation that's more in keeping with the spirit of the story and the rest of the scriptures. But I'm not dogmatic about it or anything. Okay. So, kind of getting to Rebecca's point, I want to move on now. Let's go to page 28. Let's take a look at our first application point here. I do think a lot of people look at faith, the gospel, Christianity, church life, whatever term you want to throw in it. I think a lot of people look at Christianity, and their attitude is very similar to this man. They say, okay, all right, I see what the benefits are of faith. I see what church does. It is a community of people. It's a support system. It's a great place for your kids. I know what faith does. Faith centers you, and faith gives you hope for the future. I believe on a theoretical level in God. Like, I see the explanation for God. But I think there are a lot of people who, although they can see the reasons for religion, have a hang-up of some kind. There is something that's in the way. I would become a Christian if this thing was answered or satisfied, or, you see what I mean? There's a lot of people who I think are close or would want it if. So I want to take a look at some of these reasons, and I hope that as we go through this, and this will carry over into Wednesday because we are going to be out of time in about 10 minutes or so, but as we go through these reasons, I hope that we'll be able to do a lot of sympathetic, role playing is not quite the right word for it, but I hope we can analyze these and find ways of really helping people who are going through this. Because if somebody has like one reason why they're still not a Christian, then we need to become experts in that reason, whatever it might be, so that we can help people get through that and get to the faith that they want. I do believe, help my unbelief. I think a lot of people out there are crying that to us. They say, I really want to believe in God, but I can't believe in God because of this. I really want to come back to the church, but I'm having a hard time with church because of this over here. And so let's kind of help people work through that. So the first one is, there goes any chance at happiness. I think that there's a misconception that people hold on to in their unbelief that, like, I see the value of religion and I get why people are religious. But if I change from who I am now, I just have to give up so much that just makes me so happy. I enjoy a lifestyle. I enjoy relationships. I really like the things that I do and the way that I live. And listen, it can be as simple as someone saying, I love to go drink with my friends on a Friday night, and if I go to church, well, you guys are going to make me quit drinking. I can't go drinking with my friends on a Friday night. It can be something as simple as that, which I don't find that to be a particularly compelling thing, to something as deep as perhaps a homosexual relationship, right? Like if I become a Christian, I have to divorce my husband, who I've been married to for 15 years now. To become a Christian, I have to stop having sex in the way that brings me happiness and satisfaction. That is what you're saying. To become a Christian, I have to give up something that is a part of my whole identity, pride flags on the house and everything. Now, let's be real. Is that a pretty big obstacle to becoming a Christian for people? I mean, there's no joking about it. There's no getting around it. To confront somebody with 1 Corinthians 6 verses 9 and 10, that homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of God, to confront somebody with something like that and to say there's an unimaginable life change that you're facing now if you want to be right with God. I cannot imagine. I'll just put it that way. I cannot imagine how hard that would be for someone to go, I mean, I want to believe in God. Like, I see the value of it, and I'm inclined, on a reasonable level, I'm inclined to believe in God, but the cost that comes with it, I just don't know. I don't know if I can sacrifice a lifetime of happiness for the maybe that God exists. So, all right, pretty tough, huh? On big level, okay, huge 30,000 foot level. How do you answer that? How do you start? Like, how do you start that conversation?
It's maybe best answered by someone who came from the world, someone like a Brett Mohair, someone like that, who has experienced both. But I think certainly there's an element to just understanding the depth of what really gives you enjoyment, and understanding how shallow most sins are, in terms of like the enjoyment that they give you, whether it's the drinking or the cursing or living in a relationship that you shouldn't be in, and how living a Christian life actually has very complete fulfillment with what we are allowed to do and with what we choose to do, and just kind of understanding what is it that you like about this. There's probably something deeper there that can give you meaning and enjoyment that is not sinful.
Yeah, and it's about like, okay, let's really assess life, and once you start accepting, and this is the approach I would take, is make it a spiritual conversation. Like, okay, let's take a step back from human things, earthly things, physical things, and once somebody starts to accept that there is a spiritual component to them, to me, and this is just a little bit of advice dealing with anybody who maybe is an atheist or something, to me, the first most important thing to establish is, do we have a spiritual component to us? Once somebody accepts that there is a spiritual component to you, I think you can go a lot of places with that, okay? Because then you can start asking, okay, what about eternity? If there's a spiritual component to you, what happens to that spiritual component once the physical dies? Is that spiritual component accountable to anybody? Is that spiritual component a natural thing? Well, no, it's not. Pure naturalism does not have an answer for spiritual things. So then what's the source of that spiritual component? So it's like once you start opening up the possibility of having a soul, a spirit, I think there's a lot of places you can go with that. And that's true of if somebody is only assessing their life from this physical perspective, and their whole identity is wrapped up in, I'm a lesbian and I drink and I do this and I do that. And like your whole life is your sexual behavior and your physical appetites. See, that would be the first place I would go is, so what you're telling me is that's your whole thing, your whole identity. Your whole life is you are an animal with sexual appetites and food appetites and the race for survival. And if you can start to dismantle that a little bit and talk about the spiritual value that's inherent in all of us, like I said, I think you can go places with that. So I like that comment, Jacob. It's just start by dismantling. Are we talking just purely physical things or spiritual things? Because the physical things are superficial. They're superficial. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 going into chapter 5, right? He talks about how, this temporary must put on that which is eternal. 1 Corinthians 15 talks about the natural body giving way to the spiritual body, the earthly giving way to the heavenly. Rebecca?
It might be easy enough to be summed up by asking, okay, if your life as is makes you so happy, why are you here? If it is somebody who's like looking for something. If you are happy, why are we having this conversation? Because you can tell that something is missing. And it's like, it makes me think of when the people had their altars to every single god and even the unknown god. And they're like, oh, the thing that's unknown, that's what we have. So that's what we have. We have that unknown that you're feeling like you're missing something. We have that.
I do believe, help my unbelief. Okay, what is the source of the second clause? I do believe, help my unbelief. Let's talk about that one. Let's talk about that second clause. Where is the source of the uncertainty? Where is the source of the longing? Where is the source of the desire? Okay, where is that coming from? Let's address that longing. That's a good comment. I like that. It's a good comment. I want to read the quote from this book, Becoming a Contagious Christian, because I really like the way he puts it here, and I believe it sort of sets us up for kind of establishing some more answers to the question. He said, this is top of page 28, if you commit your life to following Christ, you can take your freedom, your individuality, your sense of adventure, and any hopes you have for fulfillment in this life, and just kiss them all goodbye. That's the attitude that I think people have is, if I become a Christian, then everything that makes me, me, has to get thrown out. How do you answer that?
You know, we live in a instant gratification microwave. I want to be happy now.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I don't know why non-Christians think Christians can't have fun during life. I have a ball. And I'm a Christian, right? So it's just like, well, if I become a Christian, I can't have fun anymore. They lose that instant gratification in their life, you know, not understanding I'm living for eternal life, not for this physical life that I'm in.
Yeah, and that's how I would go about answering it also. That's a good comment, Joe. What will change people is to show them your life. And let's be clear, this is what I'm not talking about. I am not talking about just pure fun. Although I agree with you, Joe, that my life, I have fun also. But I don't go to fun. That's not my default mode, because I think it's cheesy, it's corny, and it's fake. When Christians go, hey, you know what? We still have fun on youth group Friday nights. We pull out a PG movie every now and then. We get the extra pepperoni pizza because we're wild at our church. It's corny, right? It's cheesy. And we don't want people to. We don't want to show people like, look, being a Christian, you can still have fun as a Christian. You can still have fun, because that's not the fun that they're looking for anyway. You know, like loosening up and watching a PG-13 movie every now and then is not like so we can still watch PG-13 movies as a Christian. Okay, whew, I'm sure glad you clarified that one. Every now and then you drink regular soda. Like that it's corny, it's cheesy, it's ineffective. So it's not about fun. It's about joy, right? It's showing people, hey, I still have fun. I do plenty of fun things. But you know what makes my life different? Is not the fact that I'm a Christian and I still go whitewater rafting. Okay? That's not the difference. The difference is I have joy. And joy and fun are two very, very different things. Now, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more here, but Susan, go ahead.
Well, I'm thinking it also involves a sense of order.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just have this youngest brother that, you know, life is supposed to be fun, but
yeah,
you know, where's his sense? Where is that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The purpose is, you know, you go out and drink with your friends, you know, on Friday nights and Saturday nights, but what purpose?
Yeah. And it's and not to pile on your brother Bob, because I really like him. I mean, he's a very nice guy. Her younger brother Bob is a super nice guy, really, really nice guy. But you know, for context, it's he was supposed to be a baseball star, and then you know, never became a baseball star. He got married and then got divorced, and now it's been like a string of girlfriends for 20 years now, right? It's no job has ever been like the job. It's just kind of like goes from a job to a job. He was like, you know, he was at the Relax-A-Back store, you know, selling recliners. You know, it's like, you know, and it's a good point is like, okay, I see what you're saying, like, but your life doesn't actually sound that fun. You know, you played baseball in college, good for you. You've got a bunch of girlfriends and you sell recliners for a living. Like, okay, great. That doesn't actually sound that fun. And I think we delude ourselves. And it's Ecclesiastes, right? You could read the whole book of Ecclesiastes. It's the delusion of Solomon living in a palace. He's got a palace and a whole bunch of concubines. He is gold everything. He can have sex whenever he wants. He can eat whatever he wants. He can buy whatever he wants. And in the end, he just looked at himself in the spiritual mirror and said, it's just empty. All of it is just absolutely empty. That doesn't sound that fun, actually. Tom, and then we'll go.
In my case, I never grew up in church. and did whatever. And then I realized it's not an easy road to do. It's realizing what was your fun then compared to where you made that step to what you're fun now.
Yeah.
And that isn't easy, and on my part it was a totally changed, you know.
Yeah.
Once I found the Lord and all that, it was like, well, all this stuff I used to do before was really great and really fun and did all that, but now it's a different fun, and I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
And that isn't an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking to them, what is your happiness then? What is your happiness now? That's a hard road.
Yeah.